So when we're talking about prisoner's dilemma, the reason why we're talking about it is to teach you about oligopoly. And so we teach you the baseline of what a prisoner's dilemma is, and then we teach you the oligopoly version of it, right? In this oligopoly version, we are coming in with the assumption that we are in what's called a duopoly. A duopoly is an oligopoly with only two firms. And so in green, we've got firm A. Let me make our chart here. Okay, and then in blue, we have firm B. All right, so firm A, again, just like before, we've got choices or strategies that they're deciding from, right? And then these are going to be our payoff matrices. And the choices that we are asked to decide from, being the firms, is whether or not we should hold down output. And this is essentially cooperating with other firms, or whether we should increase our output. And this would be not cooperating. I guess we could say this would be competing. And firm B is also going to have a similar hold down output, co-op, or increase output, which is to compete. And so we're told that if firm A holds down the output and cooperates with firm B, then firm A and firm B are able to earn $1,000. It could be $1 million, right? We're just using small numbers here, of profit, of abnormal profit. And firm B would be $1,000. Oh, something's getting to me. Allergies. Now, what if firm A were to increase the output while firm B holds it down? Well, firm A, in their competing, right, that extra output means they're going to get more sales, right? So A is going to end up with $1,500, and B is going to end up with $200 in this scenario. A is going to eat B's lunch, right? What about the situation where firm B decides to compete, but firm A decides to cooperate? Well, that's going to be flipped, right? Most of these are going to be symmetrical. So we're going to have B over here earning $1,500 instead. And we're going to have A only earning $200. And then last but not least, what if they both, go from the window to the wall and they just compete with each other the whole time? Then we're going to have A earning a profit of $400 and B earning a profit of $400. So again, just like we did before, we're going to ask ourselves, what would we do if we were firm B and firm A had already decided to hold that output down? If we're firm B, are we going to decide to increase the output and compete and get $1,500? Or are we going to decide to hold output the same, cooperate, and get $1,000? We're going to compete. Very good. And then we're going to move this and cover up the other side. And we're going to say, well, what if firm A decides to compete? Are we going to hold output down and get $200, or are we going to compete and get $400? They're going to compete. Very good. And so we find that they have a dominant strategy to compete, right? And then we're going to do a similar thing with our firm A. We're going to say, well, if firm B has committed to holding down output and cooperating, they're going to compete because competing gives them $1,500 compared to cooperating with firm B, which gives them $1,000. Similarly, if firm B decides to compete, they're going to choose between 200 and 400, and they're going to choose to compete. Very good. And so we find that both of them have a dominant strategy of competing. And I'm not going to make us do the whole analysis like we did before, but this is also our only Nash equilibrium that is also present. And so we find this situation where, the way out is to try to find a way to penalize those who don't cooperate, right? But there's also no real way to do that. These agreements to hold down output, are illegal, right? And so you can't enforce an illegal action, right? You're just going to get yourself in trouble. So we do have some tacit collusion, right? Which is the notion that firms will, like Walmart will increase the price for something, and then instead of competing with them, Target will increase the price as well, right? So we have tacit collusion. We also have this notion of tit for tat, where when people do price increases, you do price increases. When people do price decreases, you do price decreases. So the only thing that's explicitly illegal is the explicit collusion, right? So if you have a tacit, if you have, if they can't really prove that you talked specifically to the other company, then you're out of luck. Then you can, well, not you're out of luck, but then you're good to go. You can go ahead and do that collusion activity. But there's been some situations where, and I forget exactly where, the book talks about it, but it was like some airline company called up the other airline CEO, and he was like, hey, let's keep prices high for the next 6 months and make more money. If we both keep the prices high, then nobody's going to be able to, we're the two budget airlines, and so we'll both make a bunch more money. And the government, somehow caught wind of this and did an investigation, and they found evidence of these emails between these CEOs, essentially talking explicitly about their collusion, right? So, it would be great if we could get to this outcome, right? This outcome where the cooperate.
There's nothing they can do about it?
There's very little.
Can't do nothing about it when they do stuff like that?
Oh, when they come together? No, absolutely. The government came in and they fined the companies and they told them they couldn't do it. No. So when it's explicit like that, you know what I mean? When the CEOs, the management of the companies are talking to each other, then no, absolutely. They absolutely can, and they do enforce these antitrust policies and stuff like that to make sure that to make sure that there's sufficient competition in the market, right? At the end of the day, the government really, one of the main tenets of economics since the founding of economics in 1776 with the writing of The Wealth of Nations and by Adam Smith has been that, some of us are producers, some of us are laborers, right? But we're all consumers. So at the end of the day, if the government can enact policies that are going to benefit consumers, that's going to have the greatest kind of populist support, right? Because otherwise you're pitting, capital owners and laborers against each other.
Well, he did stuff on taxation too, right, Adam Smith?
Yep.
Or what was it? The foundation, or the.
Yeah, he had a couple of, he had a lot of real important stuff. The Wealth of Nations and the Theory of Moral Sentiments are the two main texts that we kind of have derived a lot of economics from. So him, David Ricardo, Karl Marx, these are all people that have had some heavy influences on what we know to be economics as it is these days.
But is it with everything that's considered business too? Because it's with accounting too, right? They use Adam Smith at his work too.
Yeah, there's some in there. You know what I mean? But I mean,
taxation and all that.
yeah, There's some in there, but there's probably other people that are more grandfathers than Adam Smith in those situations, you know? He's definitely the grandfather of economics, though, that's for sure. So questions on game theory, on how oligopolies relate, right? So, you know, even though they would love to hold down output, there's no enforcement mechanism. There's no way for them to ensure that the other person is also going to hold down the output. And so as a result, we end up down here at a suboptimal equilibrium, but it's our only equilibrium there is. This isn't an equilibrium because why? Because there's unilateral incentives to deviate, right? There's incentives for A to go and compete and get 1,500, and there's an incentive for B to go and compete and also get 1,500 instead of the 1,000. So this is not a Nash equilibrium, but this one is. Questions on that?